Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and welcome back to my channel. So I have read a lot of books over the last 6 months, and in today's video, I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite books, some of my biggest disappointments. We're going to be doing the mid-year freakout tag. Alright guys, so it is officially that time again. Welcome to the mid-year freakout tag. I cannot believe we are already halfway into 2025. That just seems insane to me. But in this video, I will essentially be recapping the first half of the year. So I'll be discussing the highs, the lows, my newest book boyfriend, some new special editions, some books that I ended up DNFing, and everything in between. So I love doing this video every year. It just gives me a really good idea of how my reading year is going so far. So hopefully you'll be able to get a really good rec. Now, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram, Goodreads, and Patreon, all linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's do the mid-year freakout tag. All right, guys, so I'm going to combine the first two prompts just because I need my computer to answer the questions. So the first question is, how many books have you read so far in 2025? Now, according to my notes, I've read 58 books so far this year, so I'm pretty happy with that number. It is less than what I've read in the past. However, I've had some amazing reads this year, and I feel like I'm not forcing myself to read when I really don't want to. That was happening so much last year, and I feel like it kind of ruined my ratings of books. So I'm enjoying this pace. But anyway, 36 of those books were fantasy romance or romantasy, and then 22 of them were contemporary or dark romance. I feel like most of the dark romance is just books by Rena Kent. I discovered the Legacy of the Gods series this year and became obsessed, so that is 6 books right off the bat. And then I've been diving into her backlist, and Rena Kent, new favorite dark romance author. Her books are just addicting and chaotic, and I love them so, so much. So with that out of the way, the next prompt is, how many 5-star reads have you had this year? Now, I've had a lot, and I feel like some of that has to do with my rating system. I added a 6-star rating over the last 6 months, and that has actually increased the amount of 5 stars, because the issue I was seeing was I would read a book, it would be like one of the best books I had ever read, kind of like Sword of Kaigen, and then I'd compare all the other books I wanted to give 5 stars to Sword of Kaigen, and that wasn't really fair because that was such a next level read for me. So I now have a 6-star rating that I reserve for 3 books a year. Actually, another ML Wong book is one of my 6 stars, Blood Over Brighthaven, but I'll talk about that later. But anyway, I have a lot of 5-star reads. So altogether, I've had 11 5 stars. I'm going to read these in order of when I read them. So first up, we have Crown of Oaths and Curses, which is a fantasy romance, enemies to lovers, true enemies to lovers. So, so good. God of Fury, Rena Kent, I think it's the 4th or 5th book in the Legacy of the Gods series, romance. Oh my gosh, I love it. That's a 6-star. Could not stop thinking about that book. Then we have Fate and Furies, which is the 3rd book in the Legend of Thesmar series, which is another romantasy series. Then The Scattered Bones. This is the only 5-star on this list that I have no desire to reread. It is an amazing story, but it is dark and kind of bleak, and I loved it. No desire to reread it, and that's a first for me. Blood Over Brighthaven, which is actually another 6-star read. Absolutely loved it. Anathema by Carrie Lake. That is a gothic fantasy romance. I need the sequel to release immediately. I loved that book. And then Releasing 10. Oh my gosh, if you saw my most recent book haul, I did kind of discuss my thoughts on Releasing 10 and the controversy, but Releasing 10 is also possibly my last 6-star of the year. We will see, but it's definitely my top contemporary romance I've read in a very, very long time. That book is very hard to read, but so, so amazing. And then The Wind Weaver, which is a recent romantasy I picked up with Covers by Cassidy. I'm pretty sure is her tag. She's another fantasy romance content creator, and she was talking about this book, and I decided to give it a try. Oh my gosh, worth the hype. So, so good. And The Night and the Moth, I just finished. That is a gothic fantasy romance, super creepy. Also, absolutely loved it. Broken Souls and Bones, which is a Viking-inspired fantasy romance that I also loved. Sunrise on the Reaping is the last one, and that was such a surprise. That is the most recent book in the Hunger Games series. So YA, kind of dystopian. But yeah, those are all my 5 stars. I have had such an amazing, 6 months of reading. And the next prompt is, what is the best sequel you've read so far this year? So I actually have 2 for this. I could not narrow it down. First up, we have Sunrise on the Reaping. I did not expect to love this book the amount I did. Honestly, it has been so long since I read the original Hunger Games series. I wasn't even going to pick this up. I picked this up on a whim. Oh my gosh, this book. This book is so relevant to what is happening right now in the world, and I read it at the perfect time. But if you're unfamiliar with the story, it is set in the world of the Hunger Games. So if you're unfamiliar, I don't want to spoil it for you. But we are following Hamish Abernathy, and he is just trying to live a peaceful life with the girl he loves until his name is called and everything changes. Now he's thrust into a rigged arena with 3 other tributes, and they are going to have to do whatever they can to stay alive. And this is probably my favorite book in the entire Hunger Games series. I love Katniss, but oh my gosh, what Hamish goes through, I wasn't sure how they were going to make me not relate to him, but really, I always felt bad for Hamish, but after watching and seeing what he's had to experience, it makes so much sense why he is the way he is when we first meet him in the original Hunger Games movies. Also, this has such a strong message about manipulation in the media and people changing things to suit their needs. And I loved this book. So please, if you've been hesitant to pick this up because you think you're over YA, it is so, so good and so important, so please give it a try. I loved this. Now, the other book is also I feel very important, but also a very hard read. So we have Releasing 10. There's been a bunch of controversy about this book. I'm not even going to get into that in this video, but I rated this 6 out of 5 stars. I absolutely love this. It's part of the Boys of Tommen series, which does follow younger characters, however, definitely not a young adult series by any means. Please check the trigger warnings before going into these books. Once again, very, very heavy topics. In this one in particular, we are following Lizzie, and Lizzie has bipolar disorder and also has had a very traumatic childhood, and just traumatic events have taken place. So she is really lonely and just trying to get by, and she meets this boy who really has an old soul named Hugh. He happens to be her good friend's older brother, and they have this immediate connection, and it's their love story, and it is raw and heartbreaking and traumatic, but oh my gosh, I was rooting for them so, so hard. And I will also say I had no idea this was not a standalone going in. So please know that there is a second book that should be releasing. This does not end with an HEA. So I know I've had a few people be kind of upset when they realize that. So definitely know that. But oh my gosh, I love this series so, so much. And the next prompt is name some new releases you haven't picked up yet. There are a ton. So right off the bat, I can think of Realm of Thieves by Karina Halley. That book just released. Unfortunately, Karina Halley, typically it takes a very long time for her audiobooks to come out. So I'm either going to have to read that physically or probably wait at least 6 months for the audio, which is a bit of a bummer. Another one is Fairytale. Now, technically, this is not a new release. However, it is getting re-released. I think it got picked up by a trad publisher, so it kind of is new. But the audiobook for this finally dropped last month. So I will be reading this in July. I cannot wait. My friend told me about this book about 2 years ago, whenever this book first released, and it sounded so, so good, but it is quite chunky, and there was no audio, so I never picked it up. So this is one I have been dying to read. And then another one that is technically not a new release is Direbound, but this one also has not had an audiobook, and the audiobook keeps getting pushed back. So as of now, it says July. This was also picked up by a trad publisher, so it is getting re-released, so it kind of counts. And then last up is Enigma by Runix. I actually have this book just sitting on my work table, so every morning I stare at it, and I'm like, I really, really want to read you. I just have so many other reading commitments, but I'm definitely hoping to pick this up in early July. And the next prompt is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? This is such an unfair question. I have so many new releases coming out that I could not narrow this down. So the number one and my most anticipated has to be Alchemized by Senlin Yu. So if you're unfamiliar with Alchemized and Manacled, Manacled, which is the fan fiction Alchemized is based on, was Harry Potter, Handmaid's Tale. It was essentially what would have happened if Voldemort won the war against the Order of the Phoenix, and it follows Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy. Now, Alchemized, the new one coming out, has been traditionally published with all of the nods to Harry Potter and Handmaid's Tale removed. So I'm very curious how this is going to work, because there's going to have to be a lot of world building in an already very long book. But I love Manacled with all of my heart. It is one of the best books I've ever read. So I need Alchemized. And it's coming out on my birthday week. So very excited. So Alchemized is number one. Also, the last book in the Reign of Shadows and Ending series, the Legacy series by Melissa K. Rorich. Oh my gosh, I know that book is going to break me. So I'm very excited about that. Brimstone, which is the sequel to Quicksilver. Cannot wait. I'm actually going to be reading Quicksilver and doing a recap video for you guys in case you don't want to do a reread. Then Bonds of Hercules, which is the sequel to Blood of Hercules, which is like a wide shoes, kind of Roman-inspired, awesome book. I love that book so much. The character, or the main character, is so kick-ass, and she has a sassy snake companion, and the dark humor in Bonds of Hercules is just unmatched. So those are some, but there's so many more. There's so many books coming out in the second half of the year. I'm just so excited for. And the next prompt is, what has been your biggest disappointment so far this year? So unfortunately for me, it is Hellfire. So honestly, this book had so much potential. I was just confused through a lot of it. So this is essentially following this angel type being that after the death of her mother, she does something and she's on the run, and she ends up selling her soul to this devil type character in order to stay in his realm, and it's a romance between the two of them. And everything about this story I was really enjoying. It's just all of the characters in this had two names for some reason. So I was having a really hard time just keeping track of all of the different characters, and even the places also had multiple names. And the transitions between scenes and between characters just didn't make a lot of sense while I was reading. Everything felt very disjointed, with info dumps and then a lot of nothing and then some more kind of info dumping. And I just felt very little for the romance. So unfortunately, I feel like I waited years for this audiobook to drop, and then I read this entire book in one sitting. I wanted to love it, but it just really didn't work for me. And the next prompt is, name a book that surprised you. I feel like a lot of you probably aren't going to like this answer, but it is Silver Elite by Danny Francis. Only because I knew nothing about this book. I had never even heard of this book until it completely blew up on Bookstagram. This was not on my radar at all, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I thought it was really fun. This story is essentially following this girl named Ren, who has been hiding her powerful magical abilities because being seen with psychic abilities essentially means death in her community. So everything changes when she's captured, and she decides that she's going to try to take down this regime from the inside, from their own military academy. And she has to kind of lie to everyone around her. And I liked it. It reminded me a lot of Fourth Wing, just kind of a dystopian, more Divergent version. But overall, if you like dystopian books that have a lot of fantasy romance tropes, I think you would really enjoy this. And the next prompt is a new favorite author you've discovered this year. Honestly, this was the easiest out of all the prompts. So it's Rena Kent. I am obsessed with her dark romances. I don't know what she puts in her books, but once again, they are addicting, and she writes unhinged so well. She has made me fall in love with so many psychopaths. It is really insane, but I absolutely love her dark romance. Specifically, God of Fury, once again, one of the best books I've ever read. Brandon and Nikolai will live in my head rent-free for the end of time. But this is essentially, well, the entire Legacy of the Gods series is following these two rival schools and essentially two gangs within the rival schools that end up dating from each other's gangs and how that kind of works. So we're following one school that has a lot of kids that have parents in the mafia, and then another school that has a bunch of kids that's parents are very rich and do some deplorable things on the side. So I have loved every single Legacy of the Gods book I've read. There are a few that are definitely standouts, God of Fury being one of them, but if you have not checked out Rita Kent, I feel like this is a great place to start. I know it's one of her more recent series, but I've been slowly working my way through her backlist, and it's been really fun seeing the parents of the kids from this series, like, get to know each other and fall in love. So overall, Rita Kent is my #1 author I discovered so far this year. And the next prompt is name a book that made you cry. Now, here's the thing. There is going to be overlap between my absolute top favorite books of the year and books that made me cry, mostly because I've realized if a book makes me cry, I tend to end up loving it. I love books that can evoke that emotion because typically I don't cry when I read. So if I'm reading a book and I am full-on ugly sobbing, it is probably my favorite book of the year. So I'm not really going to get into plot, but I will tell you the books that made me cry and why. So first up, we have Blood Over Brighthaven by Emma Wong. Dark academia, fantasy romance. This made me cry because of rage. Just sheer rage. Then, Releasing 10, Boys of Tobin, contemporary romance. I've already talked about this a little bit. This made me cry just because of sadness. It was so upsetting. Also a little rage, mostly sadness. And Sunrise on the Reaping. This made me cry for a mix of sadness and rage. Sadness and rage. I had a little bit of both with this one. So those are 3 books that definitely made me cry. And next up is, do you have any new favorite book boyfriends? So essentially all of the guys from the Legacy series by Rita Kent, specifically Nico, obviously, Brandon, Landon, all of the guys. Creighton, every single one I am completely obsessed with. When it comes to fantasy romance, I will say Soren is such a standout, and where we're at our read-along, we just read Lady of Shadows, so you guys know what I'm currently going through. But Lady of Darkness, I am loving this series, and a lot of that has to do with Soren. I'm obsessed. He's just the best. He's the best. But if you're unfamiliar with Lady of Darkness, it's essentially a fantasy romance following Scarlet as she's trying to get revenge on the people that she believes killed her family, and she's this badass assassin, very similar to Tog, Throne of Glass in a lot of ways, but oh my gosh, loving this book, loving Soren. And then also the main love interest in Broken Souls and Bones, I'm pretty sure his name is Rourke. He is a complex character, and I immediately was like, I like him. I like him a lot. So I am so interested to see how this romance is going to progress, and I absolutely loved Rourke. He was my favorite part of this entire book, and I gave this book 5 stars. So highly recommend. If you haven't read this yet, it's kind of like a Viking-inspired fantasy romance. It is adult, and it kind of reminded me a little of Shadow and Bone, at least the magic system. It deals with like this creepy bone shard magic, and I really love this. So those are some of my favorite book boyfriends. And next up is, what is the most beautiful book you have purchased this year? So I actually had to like take apart my background because some of those books were like very prominently displayed. But first up, we have The Knight and the Moth. This is actually the Fairy Loot Special Edition. Oh my gosh, stunning. And not just this gorgeous artwork, but when you open it, the inside artwork is like mirrored. Oh my gosh, I love this book. I love this book so much. So this is definitely one of the most beautiful books. I also loved this book. Loved it. I will say this has mixed reviews, and it probably won't be for everyone. The writing style is very unique to Rachel Gillig. She has a very descriptive writing style that I really loved, but it can be a little bit wordy, and also some things were a little bit hard. The beginning of this book, I had a hard time kind of getting into. But once the action started, oh my gosh. And there is a character in this, a gargoyle, that he owns my heart. Honestly, he should have been a top book boyfriend because I love him. And I will protect him at all costs. He is my favorite character I've read this year, with all my heart. So this is one. And then Reign of Shadows and Endings by Melissa K. Roerich, the first book in the Legacy of the Gods series. I went to a Polycon, got a last-minute ticket. This was the only book I wanted, and I was so excited that I was able to get it. I'm obsessed. I just think this book is so pretty, which is why I normally have it like right behind my head, just to show it off, because I love it. And another one is Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. I actually have to give a shout out to my friend April from Happily Ever April. She sent me that this special edition was releasing, or else I would have had no idea. And this book is gorgeous. And not only that, one, I had it signed by Olivia Rose Darling when I was at ApollyCon, so that's super cool, as you can see. But also, all of the eyes, I guess there's different colors depending on the dragon. So there's a bunch of different special editions. I was really excited. I got the blue eye. We had no idea what eyes we were going to get when they shipped. But some of my friends had the green eye, and I just think that is such a unique and cool idea. So this is one of my favorite books just ever. And next up is books you need to read before the end of the year. So I'm not going to include new releases in this, and I already talked about Direbound, so I will definitely be reading this in July, as long as that audiobook does not get pushed back. Then we have Dear Reader by Tate James. I've been wanting to pick this up. I actually got an ARC, but I never had time. So this is a romantic suspense, apparently has like secret society vibes, and I really enjoy Tate James's writing, so I know once I get to this, I will love it. Then we have Kiss the Basilisk. I've heard this is completely unhinged. I also didn't realize the original name of this was like Spit or Swallow, but apparently there was an audiobook out there for this at one point. It has since vanished, and I cannot find it anywhere, but hopefully an audiobook releases for this, because I am just intrigued. I just know this is like somewhat of a monster romance where she is partnered with some sort of snake to like teach her the art of seduction, and that just sounds wild to me, so I want to give this a try. And then last up is Metal Slinger. I've had two friends. I keep telling them I will read this book, and then I keep like putting it off. The audiobook for this also, I think, is releasing at the end of June, I believe. So I actually should get to this soon. But I've heard very, very good things. No one is really telling me the plot of this. They keep telling me to go in blind, but they say the ending makes the entire book. So that's all I really know, but I have a feeling I'm gonna love it. And the last question is, what is your top read of the year so far? Now, I completely cheated. So I have my top read of the year so far, but I also have my top read for fantasy romance, and then my top read for contemporary romance, and then my overall just top read. So starting off with fantasy romance, we have Broken Souls and Bones by L.J. Andrews. Already talked about it. Viking-inspired fantasy romance, creepy bone shadow magic. I loved everything about this. More people need to read it. But this is tied with The Night and the Moth. And honestly, I was not expecting to just love this book, especially in the beginning. In the beginning of this book, I thought I was going to rate this like a 2-star. I really struggled to get into the story. But once I was in. And the gothic vibes and just the imagery, so creepy. And the way things are described, like you felt like you were there. And once again, just because of the gargoyle, I'm going to give this like one of my top books of the year. I love that gargoyle. I don't know what it is about him. He has really big feelings, and I love that gargoyle so much. So that's another one. And then my top contemporary romance, easily releasing 10. No question. I haven't read a ton of contemporaries this year, but nothing is beating this book. I loved this book, and I literally get upset just thinking about some of the moments in this book, but also just the romance. There is beauty in this book as well. It's not just an entire book of trauma and upsetting events. There are beautiful and touching moments, and there are even some like comedic moments that are thrown in. So I feel like it is a well-rounded book. It's just the hard parts are so hard, but oh my gosh, I love this. So another one. But my top overall read so far this year, I actually think is Blood Over Brighthaven, which technically is not a romance, which is kind of why I threw those other books in. This is straight dark academia fantasy. There is a little bit of a romance, but it's very, very minor. This is one of the best books I've ever read in my life. It will enrage you in a lot of ways. And if it doesn't, I have questions, but it definitely will evoke some emotion. It's essentially just following this girl who is trying to make it in a field that is primarily men, and her realizing and coming to, it's really her finding herself and her own power, and she has to do a lot of growing throughout this book, and I love how this book is able to show that and just show so much about the world and how we relate in it. And I loved this book. Once again, it might enrage you. There's definitely some parts that made me unbelievably angry. But I feel like it is another book that is very reminiscent of where we are in this world today. And it's a very powerful story. So I love this. It probably will be my top read overall of the year, which is funny because last year my favorite book was Sword of Kagan, also by the same author. So I don't know what this author puts in her books, but oh God, she does not miss. Never misses. And this also made me ugly, just sob and scream, but mostly sob. So highly, highly recommend. I think everyone should read this book. I love this book so, so much. All right, guys, that is it for my mid-year freakout tag. If you are seeing this video, consider yourself tagged. I'd like to say a special thank you to my Paladin protectors, Amanda, Christy, Kat, Lada, Leslie, Nerdy, Spoon, and the Sarandrea family. Thank you guys so, so much for supporting my channel. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.